And from when I was a little boy, I remember my mother always saying to me, remember, as long as you got your health, you got everything. I never forgot that. It got me working out it got me actually in front of the television exercising to a guy by the name of Jack LaLanne when I was 7 years old. It got me to my first set of weights when I was 9. It got me to the point where I brought my friends down to my cellar to teach them how to lift weights. It was something I never stopped doing, and I never stopped believing in the value of working out and exercise.
Leadership is everywhere. In our work, in our family, in our community. We see leaders by their actions. We know their legacy. This podcast is about leaders, people just like you, doing amazing things every day. I hope these stories inspire you, they motivate you, and they fuel your leadership legacy. My name is Vicki Guy. Welcome to Ignite.
Welcome to Ignite. Our guest today has so many stories to share that it was impossible to get them all in. However, Joe Cirulli, the owner of award-winning Gainesville Health and Fitness Center, tells us what it took for him to go from living in his car to running a world-class fitness center. Today, we will explore persistence, defined as the continuation of a course of action in spite of difficulty. Persistence is one of those qualities of leadership that will set you apart for sure. And if you have ever wanted to know what persistence and resilience looks like, be certain to stay tuned. After a short break, we'll be right back to talk to Joe.
My name is Dana Morrison. I'm the IT director at Grace Christian School in Raleigh, North Carolina. IT directors often hoard so much knowledge that it's hard for their team members to learn. IT Pro TV has given us the ability to level up our technicians to a point where they can decide this is important for me to learn. I would recommend IT Pro TV to any IT team. It's just a great tool for any IT professional.
Okay, welcome back to Ignite. We're here today with Joe Cirulli. Joe is the owner of Gainesville Health and Fitness and has been the recipient of many awards, too many to name really, but Joe was the Club Industry Lifetime Achievement Award winner in 2002 for his work in the healthcare industry or the health fitness industry. He also has been awarded with an Entrepreneur of the Year award through Clark Butler. And the club itself, Gainesville Health and Fitness, has been awarded with many, many awards over the year, including a top 25 business in America from Forbes magazine. Welcome, Joe. Thank you so much for being on Ignite.
Yeah, thank you very much, Vicki.
Yeah, and I know there's a lot of titles behind what I just said, and I know that you've told me that those sometimes don't mean a ton because it's where you're going, not where you've been. But I'm sure you have a lot of proud moments from building your company to where it is today. So I appreciate you sharing some of that with us. Before we just jump into some of your stories, I just want to remind you that this podcast is really dedicated to sharing stories about people that are just doing things that demonstrate leadership in their lives. And using those stories to inspire others is really the goal for this podcast. So again,
Yeah, sure.
Thanks
Great
for sharing
idea.
those today.
Thank you.
Yeah. So to get us kicked off, I thought you could share with us a little bit about how you got here, the success that you're feeling today, the company that you've been able to build over the last number of years. It did not happen overnight, I know. A lot of hard, sweat and tears have gone into it probably. Can you summarize for us how you got here?
Well, first of all, I've always believed in the concept that success is a course, not a destination. So it's something that we always keep working on. And I think from the moment I got in the industry, I was always trying to figure out how to become better at what it is that I did and what I was building. When you talk about it wasn't like an overnight thing. To be truthful, from when I was 19 to 24 and a half, I worked for 6 companies that went bankrupt. I lived in closed down buildings. I lived in health clubs I worked in. I lived in my car. I remember getting down to my last 12 cents. But the thing I think that drives people who know where they want to go is a passion that kind of is much greater than all the challenges that you're going through. And even during the toughest times, I always found ways to keep focusing on moving forward. I found books to read that could inspire me. I found tapes to listen to inspire me. And those were the things that I did to start building a business. And the other thing I learned is when you have a passion for something, over time, you'll start attracting people who also have a passion for that same thing. So when I was 24 and a half, that's when I started my company. Nobody knew back then I only had $1,700 to start my business. And but somehow every week I was able to promote it and advertise it and get more people in to help keep it going. And I found ways to pay the contractors each week enough to keep them going for another week. And that was the beginning, of our centers.
Yeah. So what was that passion that has been driving you and drove you at that point in time to start your own company?
Well, I think there's one thing that I've never, ever forgotten. And from when I was a little kid, my mother was a nurse. And from when I was a little boy, I remember my mother always saying to me, remember, as long as you got your health, you got everything. I never forgot that. It got me working out it got me actually in front of the television exercising to a guy by the name of Jack LaLanne when I was 7 years old. It got me to my first set of weights when I was 9. It got me to the point where I brought my friends down to my cellar to teach them how to lift weights. It was something I never stopped doing, and I never stopped believing in the value of working out and exercise. And when I first came to Gainesville, literally to visit somebody for 30 days, and I needed a place to work out, and the girl had a brother who was a member of the Steve Spurrier Health Spa. And I went over there with him, and I told the owner I didn't have enough money to pay to work out. I was only in town for a month, but I'd work for free if he'd let me work out for free. And that was how it started. And then I realized I really liked helping these. I mean, I was 19. I mean, they were all men. And but helping them and teaching them how to work out, then that developed into great friendships and developed into staying for 30 more days and then 90 more days, which eventually led to what we're doing today. But I've never lost my passion for not only me working out, but for helping other people. And fortunately, I've got a great staff of people who also believe in the same things.
So surrounding yourself with people that have that same value, that same passion.
Oh, there's no
drive.
doubt. Yeah, there's no doubt. I in the beginning, I had 3 employees, and that was back in the 70s. And today I still have one of those 3. The other person, a woman, she retired a year ago, a little over a year ago. So, and then from there, I have a lot of people who've been with me for 40 years, 35 years, 30 years. And we all believe in the same thing. We all have a passion for what we do. And the passion isn't about making money. The passion is about helping people. And I found if you do that well enough, the money part takes care of itself.
That's so easy sometimes to say, especially if someone is trying to start something and they get hung up sometimes on the money part of it, I know. You mentioned that you had $1,700 to start a business. You mentioned that you, lived in your car, I think you said. That's not easy, right? You had to definitely lean on that passion to be able to push through. How did you do it?
I didn't even give myself another option. That's where I probably was more fortunate than a lot of people, was there wasn't a second thing. There wasn't, if this doesn't work out, I can do this. There was absolutely nothing else that I wanted to do. So it wasn't even a question. I just had to work through it until I got through it. And once again, because of the books and everything that I read that were all on how to think and how to focus and how to deal with difficult times, I'd read about people who went through so much worse than what I was going through. I'd look and I'd say, if that guy could do that, I could do this. And like I said, not having a second choice, because I think what happens with a lot of people is they have a first choice and it's really difficult, and it's so difficult that they also have a second choice and they go to the second choice. I didn't have a second choice. There was nothing else that I wanted to do. And I knew that by the time I was 21. And, I had already worked for 2 companies that had gone bankrupt by the time I was 21. But I read a quote in one of the books, and it was a very simple quote. And it said, if you help enough people get what they want out of life, you'll get everything you want out of life. And when I read that, I go, that's what business is all about. just focus on helping other people. And one thing that I was always good at, when I talked to or I read books by people who were very, very successful, is I didn't have to question whether or not it was good advice or not. I would read it, say, this man is very, very successful. I'll do exactly what he said. And I won't have to go back and make the mistakes that a lot of people make. There's a great quote, and it says that a smart businessman watches a good businessman watches a smart businessman and doesn't make the same mistakes, right? Everybody knows that one. But there's a second part to it, and it's the wise businessman watches the smart businessman and doesn't make the same mistake in the first place. So, I've learned that you can learn from other people's mistakes, but the best thing to do is when you see their mistakes, don't repeat their mistakes, and just learn how to avoid those. And I think that was one of the things I was so fortunate with, working for so many different companies that went bankrupt, working under so many different managers. I could watch them all. And but I was never so pessimistic. Even though I knew maybe so-and-so was a terrible manager, I would still look to see, is there anything that he or she does right that I would also want to implement. And so I just had great teachers. And maybe they didn't know they were my teachers at the time, but they were. And I had great books to read. And that's how I made it through the challenging times.
You were pretty young when you learned some of those lessons. You said you were between 19 and 24, and you were reading these books and you were learning from others. It's so interesting because, in my industry, when I'm working with corporations and learning and development, people think, well, if I go to this workshop or I, read this book, well, everything is going to be different for me. And I always tell them, really, the world is your curriculum. And what you've just shared is kind of helps me, believe in that even further, that the world that we live in is the place that we can learn from. Even when people don't even know that there are teachers, we can pick something up. So you were pretty young to be able to pick that up at such an early age.
Well, I think sometimes things just happen. You didn't plan on it happening, but I can go back to the beginning of all the reading that I started doing. And it was when I was 20 years old and I was sitting in an office and I opened up a drawer and there was a book called The Power of Positive Thinking by Dr. Vincent Peale. And I remember looking at it thinking, I've heard about these positive thinking books. I never read one before. So I took it out of the drawer and I started reading it. And as I'm reading it, I'm going, holy cow, I'm reading about all these people who accomplished all these phenomenal things by the way they thought. And I'm looking at it, and I'm from upstate New York. My mother was a nurse. My father was military. I have 7 brothers and sisters, and we were a very middle class family. And we were not the members of the country club. We were the caddies at the country club, which was fine. But that's what it was. But when I started reading this book, I realized, my God, the world is so much bigger and larger than what I had ever imagined, based upon what I always saw. And that was like the beginning of it. And then setting some good goals. And then that led to, okay, now I need to find another book. And I was real fortunate when I was 21 to find a book called Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And I picked up that book. I couldn't stop reading it. And when I was done, I put my list together, the things that I wanted to do in my life. And this was just after I got done living in my car with my last 12 cents. I put together a list, and the very first thing on my list was, I will own my own health club in Gainesville, Florida, so no one's ever going to tell me where I'm going to live. And then I had a whole bunch of other things, on that list. And I just learned that you have to know where you want to go. And then you just start working like crazy to get there.
Mm-hmm. I would sometimes it's just that simple, like just knowing what you want, right? Knowing what it is that you want. It's funny, I remember a conversation I had with my nephew who's 15. And I said, what do you want to do with your life? And he said, well, I want to be an NFL player because he's a pretty good football player. And I said, well, not to crush your dreams, but only like 1% of all football players probably make it to the NFL. Well, do you have a backup plan? He said, well, if that doesn't happen, I want to be a rock star. And I said, okay.
Yeah.
And he said, if that doesn't happen, I guess I'll just be an attorney. So
yeah, sure.
But he definitely knows what he wants. But going back to what you said earlier is that you didn't have a second or a third. This was what you wanted to do, and it was just so ingrained in you, and that you felt so passionate about it that it really did drive your decisions and your actions throughout your life.
Yeah, made everything easy. Just don't have another choice.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if easy is the word I would use, but certainly clear, right? Certainly clear.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that, you started out with very little bit of money. You started at your club, and now years later, you've got people that have started with you. What do you dedicate, or what do you say that has really given you the success over time for people to stay with you, for the club to grow, to get to a point where there's, it's being recognized as one of the top clubs in the country? What is it? What has been that thing that you've been able to bring to a health club? Because, we know that there's a lot of health clubs out there, right? What set it apart for you?
Well, I think for any business, number one, I mean, as the owner or leader of a company, you have to be willing to do anything that you would expect anybody else to do. And I still do. If I ask you to do something, I'm more than willing to also do it myself. I think a big thing with us is the friendships that we've also developed over time. I mean, I know what the most important things are. I mean, I know that people are the most important things. And in any business, I think it's critical that there's respect, throughout the entire business, starting from the top. And I think my employees know I respect them and that I appreciate them, and I'm willing to be there for them. I also understand that there's something much more important than our business, and that's their family. And I've never lost sight of that. And meaning that if there's issues that you need to do, that will take precedence over anything you need to do with me or with us. I mean, I come from a very close family, so I know how important family is. Also, I think it's important that we always have clear direction of where it is that we're going. So I try to always spell that out. I mean, we just finished this past year with 6 years of remodeling the center. I mean, 6 solid years of remodeling and totally redesigning the club, and everybody understanding what it was that I was trying to accomplish and why I was trying to accomplish it, and what was the inspiration for the direction that we were taking, as a company, which was really built around the design of the facilities. And I think it's just a matter of like always spelling it out to them, always making them aware, not hiding stuff, from them. I think that's probably a big part of it, because, the most important thing is that everybody in the organization is moving in the same direction. And it's important as the leader to make sure they understand the direction. And then we can put together the ways to get there. So I try to include them in all of those things.
How do you do that? How do you include them in some of those? Because as a visionary for where you want it to go, where you want your business to go, as you grow, sometimes I know it's more and more difficult to have that vision being communicated correctly throughout an organization. How do you do it?
Well, I think the starting point is people, when they come to work for you, have to know where you've been. They have to know what the history of the company is, how we got to where we are today, and where we're working on being tomorrow. So when we hire all the new employees, I actually get with all of them at one time and go through, and I say, I just want to tell you the history of the whole company, where we started, the process that we went through to get to where we are today, why we're here today, and where it is we're trying to get tomorrow. So right from the start, I think that's important, because most people go to work for companies, they don't have a clue about the history of the company. They could walk into the company and think this is always the way it's been. And it's not always the way it's been. Huge component of it too is having the right culture inside your company and understanding the culture of your company in such a way that you hire people who fit the culture of your company, but you have to have a process for doing that. It's also knowing what your core values are as a company. So when you're interviewing people and when you're training people, you're making sure that they fit into that they have the core values of the company, because I've learned a long time ago, I can't teach you our core values. We have to find out if you have them. So it makes it really easy when you bring people on board who totally fit into the company culture from the first moment they start. Then it's a matter of developing, when I say relationships with them, getting to know that, I mean, for me personally, is them knowing that I don't look at myself as this person, up there in the tower, that I'm right here, with all of you. And each month, about 2 times a month, I mean, I take five brand new employees to lunch, and we sit down and just talk. But the most important thing is not me talking about me. It's me asking them to talk about them. And, I let them know right from the start, I just want you to know, I don't look at you as this cog in the wheel of the company. I don't look at you as just being a quote receptionist or as an instructor or a housekeeper. I said, just want you to know, I first look at you as being a human being, and I know you have a story, and I'm going to give you a chance to tell all of us your story. And so it's just a matter of kind of breaking down those barriers right from the start. Because a lot of times when somebody goes to work, they're new, they go into a company and they see the owner, and the owner gets this kind of, this may be the wrong word, but this level of respect that almost is like, it's untouchable kind of thing. And I just want them to know that's not who I am. That we can laugh and joke around, and we know why we're there. We're going to get the work done. That's not an issue, but that we're all in the thing together. We're all in the whole world together. And so that's the thing that I try to make sure everybody understands right from the start.
Yeah, that's great. And just for our listeners, Joe, I just want to remind everybody we're here today with Joe Cirulli. He's the owner of Gainesville Health and Fitness in Gainesville, Florida. And we're talking a little bit about building his company and some of the things that happen along the way. And going back to that, kind of that theme and that topic, as you've grown and you've built your company to where you are today, and you've been able to build a culture of where you are today, it probably hasn't always been easy. There's probably been times during that journey where, I'm wondering, have you ever questioned, like, do I still want to do this? Can I still do this? Has there ever been a time throughout your journey that you've questioned your passion?
Not my passion. I think I got depressed once for about 3 hours, and then I realized I'm not going to get anywhere being depressed. It's when I was trying to get a new location, and I was told someone else was going to take that location the next day, and I stayed up all night long and wrote out a list about why the landlord did not want that company and why he did want us. I wrote a list, went into his office, and I said, "Do you mind if I go through this with you?" He said, "No, go ahead." For 1 hour, I went through that list. And then he said, "Well, okay, thanks. I'll get back with you." But there was never a time when I thought, I got to get out of this. I've had enough. I understand, I've been doing what I do for 45 years. It's not like I haven't had some challenging times, but typically they're more of the kind of times like, how do we get through this? How do we do this? And one of the things I've just learned about myself is when there's like a big challenge, because they arise, in business, I usually wake up at 2:30 in the morning and not be able to go back to sleep. And the issue will keep going through my mind and going through my mind and going through my mind. And I've learned how to just accept it, because I've also found after about 3 weeks of doing that, one morning I'll wake up early in the morning and I'll know the answer. And because I know our brain's like a computer, and it's calculating and calculating and calculating, and eventually will spit out the answer. And I've just learned that about myself. And I've learned there's challenges and there's also answers to all of those challenges. You just have to focus on trying to find the answer, not totally focus on the problem. So yeah, there's been a lot of things. I mean, you can't be in business. I've had the business for March will be 41 years. And, of course, there have been all kinds of challenges in there, over time, but we made it through. We made it through all of them, figured out solutions to all of them.
One theme that I'm hearing through everything that you've shared so far is this level of resilience and grit that you possess that no doubt has made you very successful. And I hope you don't mind, I read an article recently and talking about resilience, I thought, wow, I need to ask you about this. They were sharing a little bit about a time where you were flying and you lost your engine.
No, I didn't lose my engine. I lost everything except my engine.
Except the engine. So you
Lost all
were,
my instruments, all my
yeah.
communication in the middle of the night. And it was an interesting night. It was I left Tampa at 12:30 in the morning, and I've been flying for a number of years, and I heard an explosion, and I didn't know what the explosion was, but I lost every instrument in my airplane, but the engine was still going, and I had departed Tampa, but I couldn't fly back into Tampa because I knew when I left there were a whole bunch of planes flying into Tampa because there was a hurricane coming up on the East Coast. So helicopters were coming in, jets were coming in, planes were coming in. So I knew I couldn't turn around with no lights, no communication, and try and land in Tampa. So I decided I was going to try and find I-75. And if I could see the lights on the road of the cars, I knew I could go north for about 45 minutes and I should be able to see the lights of the Gainesville, the rotating beacon of the Gainesville airport. The problem was every airport between Tampa and Gainesville was closed. They were all small airports. So you can turn on the lights on a small airport by going to a certain frequency and keying your mic 5 to 7 times. But the problem is you had to know the frequency, you had to know the airport, and most importantly of all, you had to have a radio that worked. So I didn't have any of those.
Oh my goodness.
So I flew for 3 hours with a flashlight in my mouth, shining on a compass, just trying to figure out the direction I was going in. And anyway, eventually I looked out the window. I couldn't see any lights anywhere, and I realized I had to be out over the Gulf of Mexico. So I made a 180-degree turn. I decided to land on whatever this thing was. I could see some lights, and I thought it's a road, or maybe it's a runway, but I can't tell. And I made the approach into it, and when I landed, all of a sudden, when I went to land, all of a sudden all the lights turned on, and it was a runway. And the reason why the lights turned on was the air traffic controller from Jacksonville knew that I had filed an instrument flight plan when I lost Tampa, and they completely lost me. And she said, I saw an airplane circle cross city 3 times and then leave and then come back. And she said, I figured it was you.
Oh my goodness.
She turned on the lights. But I think that probably the most important issue was I stayed calm the whole time. I focused on what it was. And this is, I think, important in life. Focus on what you want to accomplish, not what you're afraid of happening. And I just totally focused on, I'm going to find a place to land. I will find a place to land. And eventually I found a place to land. So it was just one of those, I wouldn't want to do it again, but it was an interesting time. But now there's instruments you can put in your airplane, even when your battery goes dead, you can still use those instruments. You could still see where you're going. And part of that was because of Steve Jobs and the iPad. We're able to use those when we fly. So anyway, it was a good experience.
Well, I'm glad you can say that it was a good experience. I'm sure you definitely learned something about yourself through that. But the reason I bring that up is when I read that, I was blown away. But then I realized this is pretty consistent with what you've done all of your life. You've been able to remain calm, know what you want, and land where you want to go. And I think that that's really just, it kind of solidified some themes that I've seen through all of the decisions that you've made and where you've gotten to. So what's next for you? What is the next step? You've built a very successful business, but I have a feeling that you're not done because I just am getting that feeling from you that there's a next step. What is next for you?
Well, we've written, we're coming out with our 17th book that we've written out of the center since 1987, working with a PhD who's written 50 books, but we have 17 of them. And we've done all the research at the centers. All the members are in the books. They're before and after pictures and all. And back in 2012, we started a new study on really the most sophisticated strength training equipment in the world. It's called X-Force. And so we decided to try and take previous studies that we've done with fat loss and muscle gain and now implement the same program, but utilizing a new style of strength training equipment. And when we were done with the research, it would blow you away. If you took any kind of program that we ever looked at that had to deal with losing fat and building muscle, and looked at any program that went 10 weeks long, and looked at any program that worked out where you worked out 3 times a week, where you had a meal plan that was a basic balanced diet, when we did that, when we looked at everything compared to what happened when we went through this program, we only did 2 workouts a week. We only did it for 6 weeks. The results in 2/3 the amount of time, in 2/3 the number of workouts, was 50% greater than any other program we found. And we found how we can build and add muscle to your body faster than any other way of training. And with the meal plan was a very well balanced meal plan. So that's when I started looking at it and wondering, what could we make this into? And then eventually we built a room to be able to do a program. And I had the opportunity to speak in England. And in London. And right before I went, I had read a book called The New Rules of Retail, which had to do with the challenges that department stores were facing, with all the boutique facilities or stores that were taking away their customers. And I started thinking about, well, we're going to have the same problem inside the health clubs. There's going to be boutiques trying to take members away. And so I started thinking through, like, what does it mean for us? I have a great architect out of New York, right by New York. His name is Rudy Fabiano, and he's one of the biggest in our industry. And I called him up. I said, Rudy, I want to talk to you about this book. And I said, I think if we can figure this out right, it may change the way you design health clubs all over the world. And he's a great guy, no big ego, great guy. And he goes, hey, I'm intrigued. I said, well, why don't you go get the book and read it? So we literally can be on the same page. I said, in the meantime, do me a favor. I said, go into New York City, go into the new Bloomingdale's, walk around Bloomingdale's, but don't look at it like it's a department store. Look at it like it's a health club. Tell me what you see, because they had referenced Bloomingdale's in the book. So he called me later. He goes, it's very interesting, the things that I noticed looking at it differently. Well, now I'm in London, and I'm walking down the street one day, and I see this store called Selfridges. And I thought, let me walk inside. It was a department store. I spent 6 hours in that department store. It was 6 stories, I think 9 restaurants, the coolest store I've ever seen. It had inside the store, it had Chanel, the store Prada, the store Gucci, and all of them had different entrances and everything else.
Inside the store.
Inside the store. Okay. And I realized you could take any one of those stores, put them out on a street corner, it'd be a complete store. Mm-hmm. And so I called Rudy and I said, Rudy, I think the guy that wrote that book must have been inside of this store. But this thing called serendipity. So I'm telling him all about it, and I come home from London and I turn on TV, and what's PBS advertising? A 1-hour special, The Secret of Selfridges, the entire history of the store and the design of the store. So I not only watched it, I ordered the DVDs and I sent it to him. As a matter of fact, I even gave it to Deborah Butler with Butler Plaza, because they were just at the beginning stages. And I saw her a couple weeks later. I said, Deborah, did you see it? She goes, see it. She goes, I make everybody in my marketing team watch it. She goes, we're going to bring in stores like Selfridges. And so one day when I was inside the club and I was looking at our X-Force, it's called X-Force Body. I'm looking at the center inside the club and I'm thinking, I wonder if I can do what I thought about when I was in Selfridges, of taking one of those stores and putting it out on a street corner by itself and see if it'll work. So that's what led to me developing the first center down in Palm Harbor, and it was because there was an individual down there who was available, and I told her, I said, look, we'll start building a business together down there, and it was close to where she lived, and she had a little boy, so I thought that'd be perfect. So anyway, that's when we built the first one down there, and now we're just finishing off the second one in South Tampa. So we'll figure out what's after that. It's not like I have this long range plan. I just have, let's get this one going. Let's see what we can learn, and then we can go to the next one. And then over time, we'll figure out what the long range plan is.
So in your flagship gym here in Gainesville, you have the store within the store, right?
Yeah.
And
Many
the
of
ones that you're building are the storefronts on its own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is one of those stores.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Well, I hope those work out well. I'll have to check those out. And
Sure.
I'm actually intrigued when you were telling me about the whole X-Force, the results from the study. I think I'm in. I think I'm gonna have to start.
It's an incredible program.
Yeah. It definitely beats the 7 days a week strict diet plan.
No.
There's so many fads and trends in fitness, right? There are these super diets and interesting workouts and all of these trends are happening. I've tried a lot of them. I'm sure many people have. Is there anything that you've learned over the course of time that you think is just tried and true, that is not a trend but will stick with us to help us maintain our well-being?
Yeah, it's not complex at all. It involves different elements. One is that you watch what you eat, right? That you don't overeat. You don't get on these, we're on the high protein, low carbohydrate, forget it. You just have a well-balanced diet. And, typically in our programs, we're 50% carbohydrates, 25% fats, and 25% proteins, because your brain needs carbs, to work. The strength training, you want to do it the most efficient way. Most people, the mistake they make is they think they have to do it every single day. What most people don't realize is the weightlifting is not what changes your body. Your body changes your body. The weight training provides a stimulus to your body to change. But the most important thing is that you give it time to change. That's why recovering from your workout is every bit as important as your workout. And that's a mistake a lot of people make. I mean, a lot of people like to be in the gym every day, which is fine. But hard training every day, you actually will get slower progress. The other thing a lot of people don't realize how important sleep is. We all know, well, you hear you should be sleeping 8 hours a day, but what most people don't realize is that the only time you build muscle on your body is while you're sleeping. And 99% of all the fat you lose is while you're sleeping. So if you're not getting enough sleep, you're literally slowing down all your progress. The other thing is water, that you drink plenty of water. Once again, this isn't rocket science. But there's another thing too, and that can really impact like losing fat off your body, and that's a lot of stress in your life. So learning how to manage and deal with stress is also, really important. So that's it. I mean, it's like I said, it's not all this special and this book and this YouTube video. I mean, I see it all because I see people see something on YouTube or something, and next thing I see them doing it in the gym. And it's sometimes a few thoughts go through my head like, what the heck is that for? But, they just people get certain beliefs in their head, and that's what they're going to do. The great thing with the X-Force program is we get you and we have a complete program. You're going to be doing this, this, and this. And we're going to be, each time you come in, we're going to be questioning you on all of these things. And I think that's what makes the program so good for so many people, that we get people who don't have all these, they don't have all these thoughts in their head as to what they're supposed to do that stops them from doing what we're sharing with them. Will help them get from point A to point B in the most efficient way and the healthiest way.
Cool. So if somebody wants to learn more about this, can they go to your website and check it out and learn more about X-Force?
Oh, yeah. It's called xforcebody.com.
Okay.
And like I said, that first center's down in Palm Harbor. I mean, we have the one in the club, but the outside center in Palm Harbor, and then the one coming along in Tampa.
Well, Joe, thank you so much for sharing some of your stories, a little bit of your insight on just well-being and health and fitness in general. So any final thoughts or any final tips for our listeners today before we sign off?
Well, I think if we're talking to people who want to create something or developing something, just get a clear vision of what it is and never stop going after it. If you look at all the qualities, when you learn about people who are successful, you can go through A, B, C, D, E, but the number one on the list I've learned from everybody is persistence. Just not giving up, because that point of giving up may be the point where everything would have turned at that point if you didn't. So I'd say just keep going.
Good advice. Thank you, Joe, so much for being here today. We're going to take a short break, and after the break, we'll be back with some final thoughts on Ignite.
Enjoying Ignite? Then you'll want to check out Technado, another podcast from the IT Pro TV network. In each episode, hosts Peter and Don recap the week's top tech news and interview IT experts from around the globe. Learn more at itpro.tv/podcasts.
In both his professional and personal life, we just heard the resilience, the persistence, and the passion that Joe lives with every single day. These are certainly traits of a great leader. Thanks for being with us today. Please subscribe to our podcast and check us out at orendaleadership.com and at itpro.tv. From all of us at Ignite, I'm Vicki Guy.